anticipation, and quiet reverence. There are hundreds of thousands of people here already gathered to say goodbye and thank you to a Pope who in so many ways defied expectations. Jorge Mario Bergoglio, known to the world as Pope Francis, led the Catholic Church and challenged its conventions. A reformer, a pastor, a pilgrim for peace.
That I am deeply sorry. I humbly beg forgiveness for the evil committed by so many Christians against the indigenous peoples.
He didn't shy away from uncomfortable truths, though some wished he'd gone further. In times of division, he called for unity. In times of war, he pleaded for peace. In life, he walked with the poor. And in death, buried in the simplicity he preferred. This morning, the world pauses to honor the life and legacy of Pope Francis in a funeral rite steeped in centuries of tradition. Good morning. I'm Heather Hiscox here in Vatican City. It's 3 a.m. Eastern. I know it is 12 midnight Pacific. Thank you for staying up to join us early this morning, perhaps where you are at home. Together, we're about to witness a moment in history. Just under an hour from now at 4 a.m. Eastern Time, the funeral mass for Pope Francis will begin. And let's just take a moment to take in this site. St. Peter's Square, St. Peter's Basilica, the spiritual center of the Roman Catholic Church, one of the holiest sites in Christianity, at once that and an architectural marvel, the towering dome of Michelangelo, the welcoming square of Bernini, and it is that square into which the Pope's coffin will be carried. It's now been sealed after 3 days of lying in state, and it will be brought out of St. Peter's Basilica and into the square before this vast crowd, set to number in the hundreds of thousands. When the service begins, we will bring it to you in its entirety with no interruptions or commentary so that you can experience it in full together with us here at the Vatican. And I say us because I'm delighted not to be alone this morning. Special guests throughout our broadcast, including someone whom you've gotten to know over these past couple of days since the death of the Pope on Monday at the age of 88. Father Darren Dias is the executive director of the Toronto School of Theology. I spoke to you earlier in the week. Here in Rome in the Vatican, we have experienced visitation together. We were inside the Basilica for some moments of respects, and we'll talk about that this morning. And today we're going to experience the funeral of Pope Francis. As you take in this scene and these crowds, what are your first thoughts this morning, Father?
It's amazing to see the crowds come. You feel a certain anticipation that after the 3 days of lying in state, this is the moment when we'll actually say our final goodbyes. And I think there's an emotional anticipation for the celebration that's to come.
Someone that we have been watching from St. Peter's Square throughout these days of visitation, and in fact, over all 12 years of the Pope's papacy, you were here when he emerged through those balcony doors. Megan Williams, thank you for joining our team today as well.
Heather.
What are your thoughts as we begin?
And obviously that was an experience that I thought I would never get to see. And being a Catholic, I felt so blessed. And then
As his casket is carried in, there will be a special group of guests lining
as the motorcade. Chris Brown is all outside St. Peter's
procedure.
Move to see the final as the motorcade passes, carrying the Pope's remains and coffin from the Vatican across the River Tiber, and then to one of the 4 basilicas in Rome, Santa Maria Maggiore. The funeral cortege traveling through the streets of Rome, as I say, to allow
that Pope was a great,
as very much the first non-European Pope reign. He was our father, one man.
Parents are Canadian. In fact,
What she meant to him as a fervent Catholic. They certainly knew each other. I think back above St. Peter's Basilica, and you can see below where his coffin will be carried and placed for the funeral service. Just to bring you up to date on who has arrived in this delegation.
And so probably Francis himself had a deep sense of the experience of God's mercy in his life. And having experienced that sense of mercy, that's something that was a characteristic of how he
The Vatican, very punctual.
looking as once the delegates have taken their
Pope Francis maintained his temperament and form of pastoral leadership, and through his resolute personality immediately made his mark on the governance of the Church. He established direct contact with individuals and peoples, eager to be close to everyone, with a marked attention to those in difficulty, giving himself without measure, especially to the mercy and
il mistero pasquale del suo figlio unigenito nelle esequie
Ibi similes eremus, cuncta per secula, et
And you mentioned to Mary, many were watching apostolic visits, and as we've been telling you, it's a poll front of the basilica at the altar. Briar, we're able to hear you again, so please continue.
Well, as I was saying, I'm not sure if you heard it, but in terms of the location where his tomb is in the basilica, that's quite significant, I think, because he had said that he didn't want it to be in the chapel itself, because that's where people come to celebrate the Eucharist, and he didn't want people wandering around there looking for the Pope's tomb. So he wanted it to be kind of off to the side. It's in a niche, sort of like an alcove, and again, very, very simplistic. Nothing too ornate, really keeping in line with his desire for a simple burial rite.
The word
The Vatican, and
and